Welcome to Dropped In, Ted. I am so excited to welcome you to our Dropped In community.
Thanks. It's really great to be here, Meg.
Yes, I am really looking forward to our time with one another, and I just love your work. So I love for my guests to share who they are and what they do as opposed to me reading your bio. Is that all good with you?
Yeah, sounds great. Well, I can say, what's probably relevant to your listeners. I have a master's in public health and also an MBA, and got those after being an English major with a writing concentration in undergrad. So it gives a little idea of kind of my technical credentials. I worked in global health for almost 20 years with a focus on HIV/AIDS, child protection, maternal child health. Through that time, I was always writing on the side, mostly young adult stuff. In 2017, I was able to shift away from working in the global health space and write full time. Right now, my passion project is probably Mystery Force, which is a middle grade illustrated series that I've done with the disability community that features kids with disabilities being the protagonists and heroes. This year, I'm releasing 5 nonfiction books. One is an investigation into child abuse of orphans in Kenya that I did along with the Washington Post. That's called 20 Years of Unraveling. And then I also have a 4-book series coming out, which is applying the principles of 12-step spirituality to kind of our current political, social, racial divisions. That 4-book series is called My Name is Ted and I'm a Racist.
Oh,
Sure, the last bit, or does
yeah.
well, so and I think we have some similar stories in terms of kind of coming to a breaking point in our life story and having to reevaluate what sort of things we had learned in our early formative years and what lessons were serving us and which we needed to throw out. For me, that was when I was around 34, and I really had reached a breaking point in terms of the work that I was doing in terms of nonprofit space, also just relationally. And I really hit with major depressive disorder. And I always say it was the best, worst thing that ever happened to me because I had to be hospitalized. And while I was in the hospital, I encountered a bunch of men and women who were in the hospital being treated for substance abuse. And they, of course, were working with 12-step programs. Now, I've never struggled with addiction or alcohol abuse myself, but their approach to spirituality, their approach to life really resonated with me. And so I kind of became a fanboy of 12-step spirituality and learning to apply it in my life. It was very helpful to kind of heal some of my own grief and trauma that I had been carrying around for a number of years at that point. As time went on, I started realizing, of course, one of the things I cared about is what's been happening in our country in terms of social, political, racial divisions. I realized that there were lessons I had learned from my friends in the recovery community that were applicable to many of the conflicts you're having within our families, within our communities, and with our country. So my name is Ted and I'm a racist is kind of taking that example from folks who introduce themselves in 12-step programs. My name is Joe and I'm an alcoholic. My name is Judy and I'm an addict. And saying, hey, my name is Ted and I'm a racist, in the sense that we all have these internal biases. And sometimes just saying it, realizing it's not the end of the world to say it, puts us on level with everyone we can grow and change.
hmm Wow. Okay. So let's hear more about the concept behind my name's Ted and I'm a racist. Is this I don't want to assume anything, so I would love some clarity around that statement.
Sure. Well, I found that as I did a lot of workshops in the past couple of years around building people's awareness of their internal biases and helping them to kind of turn inward and examine those and even examine their reactions to and their defensiveness to being things being pointed out to them like, hey, that thing you did was racist. And trying to own that in a way. And like I said, I felt like if I said it, and if I modeled embracing it, for the different workshops I did, it would make it a little safer for other people. And I have to add the caveat that I don't know if any of us really are racist. I don't know what that line is between racist and not racist. But what I try to tell people is like, we all do racist things. But you know what? We're still a good person who's deserving of love. We're not going to be cast out of the human family. And so that was kind of like my entree to this work. But then there's another layer to it, as I've been doing this work, and I think right now, especially we're in this time of reexamination of looking the issues that we have been promoting on the progressive left. And I count myself as part of the progressive left. But I think right now we've kind of looked at what happened in the presidential election in the US in 2024 and thought to ourselves, wow, how could this happen? How could this happen when we really feel like we've got good messages here? Is it how we're delivering it? And I think part of it is how we're delivering it, but I think part of it is also there's ways that we've gotten away from our principles. I think the difficulty is sometimes when you criticize the progressive left, you encounter another type of defensiveness and you encounter name calling. And people may even say any critique you have of progressive left, then you get labeled with a type of ism. If you have any critique, then you get called a racist. So the title has another layer of meaning. My name is Ted and I'm a racist. So I'm already claiming it. So if I'm going to critique the left, well, I'm already, if you're going to call me a racist, I've already called it in the name of the book. So, trying to preempt that.
You shared that we're all in some respect racist. So would you say that some are intentional and some are non-intentional? I would love to dive deeper into that because I mean this is a tough subject to speak into.
Yeah, I think we all have biases. And I try to use as many examples from my own life to just demonstrate my biases. And whether it's racism, whether it's ableism, whether it's heteronormativism, if I'm saying that right, but just recognizing that we have these biases and these are things we learn and we can unlearn them. And it can allow us to just move through life in a way that where we're showing compassion to people who are like us and not like us.
Mhm. 100%. So is that the intention behind that statement? Because that's a very powerful statement.
Yes, it's in the subtitle of the book is a white guy tries to lean into compassion and understand his country better. Shelf, and of course that title is going to attract your attention. And then you see the subtitle, I'm like, oh, okay, I get the idea here. It's just like someone sitting down in a AA meeting and saying, my name is Tom and I'm an alcoholic. You have to admit the problem before you can start to fix it. And you have to admit that it begins with you. I don't know the solution to some of the social issues facing our country and our world. But I really firmly think that a lot of it starts with our own inner work. So many of the tools I've learned from my friends in the recovery community, I find apply to the defensiveness, the anxiety that comes up when we're doing this work, whether it is examining our racism, our reaction to being called out and being told, hey, I know you're advocating for those who are vulnerable, but you might be losing the thread here. You might be getting away from your own principles here, and you might be alienating more people than you actually mean to. That openness to, hey, I'm broken, I make mistakes, and I need correction. That openness, that vulnerability is kind of what I'm trying to lead with.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. Now, you mentioned the power of storytelling and healing, specifically around shadow work and inner child healing. Like, I would love to drop into that because that would be very supportive for our community as well.
Sure. Well, I think, so much of what I learned from the recovery community is, that being surrounding people with love so that they are able to do that work, that work with their shadows, that work with their inner healing. And I think a lot from speaking from my own experience, there are so many lessons I had internalized in my formative years. Perfectionism is probably a great example. And that served me very well in high school and in college, helped me get good grades and perform, but it only helps you until it doesn't anymore. And I think for a lot of us who are recovering perfectionists, we come to realize that that drive was coming from not a place of abundance or not a place of generosity, but a place of fear. And so being able to go back and examine, okay, where did I get this lesson? Is this assumption that I'm letting that I'm that's motivating me is doesn't really have any truth to it. And I think so much of the tools that they use in AA really just basically comes down to reality testing. Is this thing that I'm afraid of? Is it really the big fearsome thing that I think it is? Or if things are things just gonna be okay? I think we have to question the narratives that we tell ourselves.
Mhm.
And so often we have these narratives again from childhood, from our formative years. And if there's one thing that my friends in the recovery community taught me, they had two ways of putting it, Meg. One, and it was the same person who told this to me. He said, we can't be stuck in the past. The past, we only have it to the extent we can remember it, and our memories are faulty. We can't be stuck in the future and being anxious about it because it doesn't exist yet. You can only imagine it. And so all we really have right now is the present moment. And so that was his elevated way of saying it. His less elevated way of saying it was, if you have a foot in the past and a foot in the present, you are pissing on, or a foot in the past, a foot in the future, you're pissing on the present.
Uh-huh.
And that gift of staying in the present was something that I learned from my AA friends. So that's a tool that I've taken, and it's in the book. How do we apply that to a workshop we're doing around internal biases or around political division? So just trying to take those tools and put them in the hands of quote unquote normies where they might be applicable.
That's incredible. I love this. Okay, so what can you drop into more specifically the 12 principles that you share in your book?
Oh yeah, oh God, it's more than 12. But I mean, one of the things I think where we get stuck, whether it's a discussion about racism, internal biases, or even just getting feedback in the workplace, is a lot of us have tendencies towards all or nothing thinking or catastrophizing, black and white thinking or binary thinking, whatever you want to call it. And that's where I think, as I mentioned, the reality testing comes in handy. And the recovery community has great slogans for this. If maybe it's like the 10-year rule. Is this really going to matter in 10 years? Is this even going to matter in 10 days? And so, and having people to trust in your community that you can circle back to and say, hey, I received this feedback and I'm kind of catastrophizing about it. And just
Mhm.
having that turn, be able to say I'm catastrophizing. And say, is this really what's happening? And, just test that reality if it's really true. And, play it forward. I think so many of us play future trip, and something bad happens to us or we get some feedback that's hard for us, and we play it forward and like, oh well, this is gonna this is gonna reflect badly on my next review, or it's gonna reflect badly on my relationships. That's gonna lead me to losing my job and being alone, and I'll lose my house. And then you play it forward, you're end up dead in the gutter. And it's always dead in the gutter. That's what my mom would always say. Like, I didn't call her, let her know I'm coming home on time, or it's past curfew. Mom be like, "Oh, I'm afraid you're dead in the gutter."
Right.
So it's being able to really question that. I'm like, am I really gonna end up dead in the gutter
Mhm.
if this happens? So that's one of them. I think another one is just many of us have a low tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity. And that is especially in a world where we are given all these messages about control and being the captains of our destiny. I think it can give us this fallacy that we have a lot more control than we really do. William Bridges years ago came out with a book on transitions that I've always found really valuable. And he talks about transitioning from either a job to unemployment to a new job, or one relationship into another. And he calls that space of in between the zone of uncertainty. There's a lot of ambiguity there. There's uncertainty there. And what Bridges talked about is how that's okay. It's a natural part of the process. And it's in that uncertainty, it's in that area where we see the boundaries readjusting. That's where creativity takes place. It's where innovation takes place. And so if we can embrace that, we can find new pathways, new ways of thinking. We can even pivot to something completely new that we may not have seen when we were back here in that previous framework. So recognizing that a little bit of fear, a little bit of anxiety with that ambiguity, that uncertainty, it's a natural part of the process, and not to let it overwhelm us. So those are two of the principles I have in the book.
That's wonderful. And my apologies for assuming the 12 principles. I was thinking of 12 steps, so my apologies.
Oh, no, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. This book came out of me writing a blog almost 7 years ago. I had really been reluctant to write a blog because I didn't think I'd have anything to say. And then one blog turned into another, turned into another. I remember saying to a friend of mine, like, wow, I seem to have a lot to say and a lot to share with people. And she knew me pretty well. And she's like, Ted, this surprises absolutely nobody. Anyone who knows you know have a lot to say.
Is it correct you have 7 books now?
I have about 30 books now.
30.
Yeah, and I have about 10 books coming out this year.
I thought I read in your bio that you have 7 books.
Maybe they need to update my bio.
So how do you write so much? That's incredible. From my perspective, I'm writing a book, and I couldn't imagine writing more than 1 book. Right now anyways.
But I should caveat that with like 7 of those books I wrote at once. It's one of my science fiction series, and I intended it as 1 book. But then when it got to 300,000 words, I was like, oh, I could probably divide this into 7. Sometimes it feels a little disingenuous to say, I've 30 books, but technically there are 30 books on my Amazon page. But, I think the key for me is, and this was advice, I can't remember where I got it, but it was that find your process, and if you can, build your life around it.
Mm.
And that has allowed me to figure out what is my process and, what helps me get into my flow state, and then kind of continue to build my life around it. And one of the real jackpot realizations I had was the time I don't spend writing is just as important as the time I spend writing. Because there's a lot of things I need to do to refill the creative reservoir. There's things I need to do to take care of my body. There are things I need to do to feel connected to my community and myself. And those do not include being in front of a laptop screen for 4 to 8 hours a day. So that was part of my realization. And I think that probably goes for a lot of people. When I talk to newbie writers and they talk about feeling blocked or having to face that horror of the blank page, I think that just means that we haven't done the work we need to do to really fill the creative reservoir within us. And it's not necessarily going back to the page, it's going back to just living life, being out in nature, being connected to other people, reading, watching, or just experiencing other artwork to get your creative gears turning. So that has definitely been part of my realization that's helped me be more productive.
You are an inspiration, my friend. Yes.
Or bangs.
Yes. So you mentioned the flow zone. That's my language. So how do you specifically, what practices do you do to get into that flow zone?
So don't want to claim that what works for me works for everyone,
Of course.
but I just know for myself that if I want to write Monday morning, sometimes I'm going to block a quiet hour Sunday afternoon to go over my notes, think about what I want to write in the morning. And I won't force myself to write on Sunday afternoon. I'll just kind of look at my ideas. And then I get them in the back of my mind where I just have them marinating for some time. And I go and do other things. I am an early riser. And
Mhm.
so I get up really early on Monday morning. And I find when I sit down in front of the computer, I write all my first drafts by hand. But I sit down and I find the reservoir is full because of the time I took the day before. And then it's just repeating that process, writing in the morning, using the afternoon to do other things that are not as cognitive, aren't such a heavy cognitive load as creating original material. And then making sure that I do those things Monday afternoon. So when I sit down again Tuesday morning, the reservoir is full again.
Mm.
And I came across an Indian mystic recently who pointed out that in the Far East, a lot of traditions consider the 3 hours before sunrise the creator's hours. And in the sense that that's when it's time to create. And being a morning person, I really connected with that. But I know that there's people who write better at night. There's people who write better in a coffee shop. So again, it comes back to, I think, finding what works for you. I listen to classical music when I'm doing nonfiction. I listen to instrumental music, movie soundtracks when I'm doing fiction. So it's what makes your work.
That's
What
so
you
cool.
observing yourself and finding what works for you.
Working with your own inner rhythms.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Well, what an inspiring conversation. I love your work. I love the messages that you are sharing with the world and the intention behind it. How can people learn more about you and connect with you?
Sure. Website is tedneilauthor.com. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and as well as TikTok for as long as it's there. I have many of my books, the audiobooks on YouTube. So people can just turn YouTube on in the background, listen to the audiobooks. And I've been posting my shorts there as well, whether they're talking about a current project I'm on or giving writing advice. And that is a Tenebrae Press, Ted Neal and Tenebrae Press. And that's the name of my imprint.
Incredible. Well, I will be checking that out for sure, and we'll put it all in the show notes as well.
Great. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you. So, one last question for now before we say goodbye is, what is a message of hope that you can offer the listeners who perhaps are thinking of throwing in the towel?
I think I have to come at this from a place of self compassion. I think it's unrealistic to imagine we'll go through life without some defeat. And sometimes course correction, we can sometimes feel like quitting something that isn't working. That in itself is a success. There's definitely something to be said for the sunk cost fallacy. And like I was saying, quitting can allow us to pivot to something, can allow us to learn a lesson from something that wasn't working. And it may feel like despair, but there is that expression, despair is the soil where hope is planted. And so I try to reframe it to, kind of that compassionate, self-affirming way of looking at it. If I have to quit a certain course of action, and I've had to do that many times, I don't beat myself up for that. I don't think it's about us always making the right choices. I think it's about building our confidence that whatever choices we make, that we can handle the consequences of those choices and whatever life throws at us. And that we can learn from the successes as well as learn from the defeats and then, move on. And of course, as my friends in the recovery community say, it's not perfection, it's progress.
Yeah.
Darkness doesn't have to mean death. Look at any creation myth the world over. Darkness is the prerequisite to creation. It's a starting point, even the darkness of despair. So, I mean, what is the life spark without the darkness to light up? Or, I mean, what is the business plan without a untapped market to explore?
Mm.
So I think, that sense of despair, sensing that sense of having to quit, maybe you have to quit a certain approach. But I think if you are following what you're aligned with, following that spiritual alignment, you're going to find what resonates with you and what resonates with the world.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. Well, I've been listening to your podcast and I've been inspired myself. So I hope I can return a little bit of it.
You certainly did. Thank you so much for this energetically rich conversation. I cannot wait to read your newest book for sure and check out all the other ones as well. And again, thank you for the work that you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me on and please keep up the good work. It's been a joy to discover your podcast. And like I said, send it to my friends who are doing similar work.
Thank you so much. Most people think scaling is about doing more strategy, more hours, more effort. Your success isn't about how hard you work. It's about how well your nervous system can hold what you're building. If your body is stuck in survival mode, no strategy in the world will make scaling feel sustainable. You'll stay in this cycle of overthinking, self-sabotaging, pushing harder while getting nowhere. Not because you don't know what to do, but because your system isn't wired to receive what you're working for. That's why I created the Inner Pharmacy Playbook. 143 power pages of real high-level strategy to regulate your nervous system, rewire resistant, and finally step into momentum that sticks. Because you weren't meant to build your empire through exhaustion. You were meant to build it with ease, clarity, and power. And that starts here. Go to the show notes and grab your copy of the Inner Pharmacy Playbook, because the next level of your business is not about grinding harder. It's about becoming the version of you who can hold it all.